for talks aimed at reducing U.S. China tensions. The Chinese government on Saturday sought to kind of downplay the cancellation, and they said, quote, in actuality, the U.S. and China have never announced any visit. The U.S. making any such announcement is their own business, and we do respect that. I mentioned that we have talked with several different experts this morning. We also did speak here with a meteorologist over in Asheville, North Carolina, who described for us what he saw as that balloon was passing overhead. I do want to play that for you here, but don't forget, I am going to leave the live image that does show Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on that, so you can watch that as we wait to see what happens. This right here is my interview with that meteorologist.
Fisher, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So first off, just kind of walk me through what you were seeing. I know you have been tracking this balloon, as most people have, across the country.
Yes, I was a bit surprised to notice the balloon in the skies above my house this morning. The original trajectories had this thing moving through western North Carolina, above Asheville, which is where I'm located, in the early morning hours, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., so before the sun came up. But I took a shot in the dark and stepped outside when I got up this morning around 9 o'clock. And sure enough, lo and behold, there it was in the sky. So running a little bit behind schedule, but I was very excited to see it up there.
Now, it is kind of strange when you think about it, because this balloon, people have been watching it all over the country and really all over the world at this point, as it's gone from Montana. I believe last night it was over in Tennessee in the Nashville area. So to know that you're seeing something that people are talking about, what goes through your mind at that point, realizing, I mean, you're part of, I don't want to say history, but you're part of what people are talking about.
Yeah, well, the first thing I did was run around and try to find a camera. I was like, I got to get a picture of this thing. But it really was so neat to see this saga play out. I mean, like you said, it started in Montana, and now here we are in western North Carolina, and it's made its way all the way here. So it was so exciting to be able to contribute to the reports. I hadn't seen any reports yet this morning of where it was located, and to the best of my knowledge, I thought I was the first one to see it. So it was just the coolest moment.
And on Twitter, I noticed that you have been tracking this, you've been posting it, but then once you posted it, so many other people there in North Carolina, the South Carolina area there, seem to be posting their own pictures. So I'm sure in your mind, you probably thought, is this the balloon that I'm looking at? But then you see everyone else's photos there. I mean, how does it feel to know that people are now coming to you to get more information?
Oh, it's fascinating. That's one of the things I love about being a meteorologist, is that I get to interact with people on a daily basis and learn more and share more about science things. And this very much so is a sciencey thing. People want to know about the balloons. It's like a weather balloon in that it goes up into the atmosphere. And this one's just a little bit longer duration than your typical weather balloon. But seeing the hundreds of reports pour in from across western North Carolina, upstate South Carolina was really great. That community is wonderful. And there's a whole variety of photos, from the cell phone photo to the professional photo. And I was certainly somewhere in the middle. But there's so many unique perspectives on it, and to be able to get as close as to see the solar panel array, which had been previously photographed out west. That was great to get that confirmation that this wasn't just another weather balloon from a National Weather Service office on the eastern in the east. This was in fact the Chinese spy balloon, or whatever we're calling it.
Yeah, that's the term I've heard, but I've heard, many other terms as well. So I'm not too familiar with the weather balloons themselves. We know that this balloon itself is about 3 times the size of a school bus, and that it has that payload there on the bottom. How does that differ from what your normal weather balloon would look like? Because we know China said initially that, oh, it's just a civilian weather balloon, and the Pentagon said not the case.
There are a couple of different types of weather balloons. The ones that are launched most often come from National Weather Service offices, and they are much smaller than what we've seen this morning. They aren't 3 school buses wide. I don't know what they get to be at their largest up in the atmosphere, but at most they're perhaps 12 to 18 feet in wide, so 1/3 of what this balloon is. And they also carry a much smaller payload. They're generally carrying basically a thermometer, and they have ways of telling how strong the winds are, what direction the winds are blowing. So they're much less intrusive than what we've seen as well.
So we've seen so many pictures that have been posted of the balloon as it was over again, Montana, Tennessee, now North Carolina. Tell me what it looks like in person because it's so different to see a picture of it. You know, it looks small and it's blurry, but you actually saw it there in person. So kind of describe it for me.
I will say I was shocked by how large it was. Most of the photos that are taken on an iPhone, if they're not zoomed in at all, it looks like it's the size of the head of a pin, super tiny. But it really was quite large. And I was lucky enough to have a few planes fly by as the balloon was floating over. And they flew pretty close, although 30,000 feet below this balloon. So I was able to get an idea for the overall size of it. And it seemed, even though this balloon was 30,000 feet higher than the planes, it was roughly the same size as these airliners, which was very surprising. It was a lot bigger than the pictures make it out to be.
So is it gone out of that area now? Because I know it's been a little bit since you did post on Twitter initially. Is it out of the North Carolina area where you are?
Yeah, so as of 10:15, it has moved east to Charlotte. It's just over Waxhaw, North Carolina was the last report I saw. So by that measure, it's moving pretty quickly, and it won't be too much longer before it's off the East Coast. Perhaps even by noon, it'll be approaching the coast.
All right, Evan Fisher, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. You're over there at UNC Asheville, correct?
That's correct. Thanks, Josh, for having me.
Thank you so much for that firsthand account. You did hear him say when he spoke to me a bit earlier that the balloon was over Charlotte, but now you're looking at a live image as it is over Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, continuing there to head toward the Atlantic. I do actually want to bring you this breaking news right here. The Biden administration moving forward with a plan to shoot down that large balloon suspected of conducting surveillance on the U.S. military, bringing it down once it's above the Atlantic Ocean, where the remnants could potentially be recovered. That is according to the Associated Press and two U.S. officials. Those officials, of course, did want to remain anonymous because this is such a sensitive operation. They say that President Biden has given the go-ahead. In a brief remark Saturday, in response to a reporter's question about the balloon, Biden said, quote, "We're going to take care of it." That was it. He was asked the question, he made that brief statement, and then he did go and get into a vehicle and drive off. Now, the balloon spotted Saturday morning over the Carolinas as it did approach the Atlantic coast here. In preparation for the operation, the Federal Aviation Administration has temporarily closed airspace over the Carolina coastline, including the airports in Charleston and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, as well as Wilmington, North Carolina. That is in effect until 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, so about an hour from now. The FAA was rerouting air traffic from the area and warned of delays as a result of the flight restrictions. Again, we did mention a bit earlier that delay was set for 2:45 p.m. Eastern time. The ground stop itself, however, it has now been extended over to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. The Coast Guard also advised mariners to immediately leave the area because of U.S. military operations, quote, that do present a significant hazard. Officials were aiming to time the operation so they could recover as much of that debris as possible before it does sink into the ocean. The Pentagon had previously estimated that the balloon, flying at about 60,000 feet in the air, was about the size of 3 school buses and that any debris field would be substantial. Biden had been inclined to down the balloon over land when he first was briefed about it back on Tuesday, but Pentagon officials apparently advised against it, warning that the potential risk to people on the ground outweighed the assessment of potential Chinese intelligence gains. Again, this is a live image over Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where anything could happen at any moment, as the Associated Press is reporting that the Biden administration and Biden himself have given the go-ahead to shoot down this Chinese spy balloon, as it's become known. The public disclosure of that balloon this week actually prompted the cancellation of a visit by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken over to Beijing, scheduled for tomorrow for talks aimed at reducing U.S.-China tensions. The Chinese government on Saturday sought to play down that cancellation. They said, quote, In actuality, the U.S. and China have never announced any visit. The U.S. making any such announcement is their own business, and we respect that. That was according to China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They released a statement just hours ago. China has continued to claim the balloon was merely a weather research airship that had been blown off course. Now, the Pentagon quickly rejected that, as well as China's contention that it was not being used for surveillance and had only limited navigational ability. Again, you're taking a live look there over in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, as that spy balloon does get closer and closer to the Atlantic Ocean. We are not going anywhere here on Live Now from Fox. We are going to stick on this image as we do wait to see how this plays out now that we know that Biden has given the go-ahead, according to the Associated Press, to shoot down that China spy balloon. It is important to note that the balloon was initially spotted over Montana, which is home to one of America's 3 nuclear missile silo fields at Malmstrom Air Force Base. In the meantime, people with binoculars and telephoto lenses tried to find the spy balloon in the sky as it headed southeastward over Kansas and Missouri, traveling, as we mentioned, at about 60,000 feet. The Pentagon, by the way, did also acknowledge overnight reports of a second balloon flying over Latin America. Quote, "We now assess it as another Chinese surveillance balloon." That is according to Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary. He released a statement that did provide that limited information. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs did not immediately respond to a question about that second balloon, so we're still waiting to hear from them on that, as to whether they feel that, it is something that they're going to take credit for, I guess you could say, because we know at this point, the one you're looking at on your screen is one that they initially said was a weather balloon and not any kind of surveillance balloon. The Pentagon, though, saying it is being used for surveillance. As I mentioned, we do want to keep live, raw, and unfiltered on this image here. That is what we do. We are here for breaking news 24/7 on Live Now from Fox, as anything major is going on. We did learn from the Associated Press not too long ago that President Biden is going ahead with that plan to shoot down the China spy balloon. The FAA has issued in response a ground stop at 3 different airports located in North and South Carolina. That was initially expected to expire here in about 10 minutes. However, it appears it is now not going to expire until 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, and it is possible that we could potentially see that extended once again. Saturday evening there in China. Still, others used it as a chance to poke fun at U.S. defenses, saying that it couldn't even defend against a balloon, and nationalist influencers leapt to use the news to mock the U.S. I am checking around on several different websites here. We're checking with the Associated Press. We're checking Twitter on several different official. Oh, I believe it just happened there. That was it. Live, raw, and unfiltered. It appears that that China spy balloon has now been shot down over the Atlantic Ocean. You are taking a live look here, live, raw, and unfiltered, as that balloon appears to be heading downward after it has been shot down. So we have been watching this all throughout the day here on Live Now from Fox. If you have been here with us, you've been watching, honestly, at this point, just to see exactly what happens. And it appears that we have now gotten our answer. It looks as though It looks as though it has been shot down there right over the Atlantic. Not sure on the exact location, but as we mentioned, it is coming down as we speak there. This is just one example of here at Live Now from Fox. If you do join us, you can check out livenowfox.com. We are always on breaking news 24/7. So when you do have something like this that is happening, you can watch it live, raw, and unfiltered right here. I am going to leave this image up here as we watch it. This is over Myrtle Beach, the Surfside Beach, South Carolina area where this is all ongoing, as Fox News Channel providing us this image, this camera that does show that Chinese spy balloon has been shot down by, I guess, the call of President Biden, you could say. He had the option to either shoot it down or let it just keep going out of U.S. airspace. And it appears that he has now chosen to shoot it down. And what I'm doing is working to change what it says there on the bottom of your screen to let everyone know that it does appear that that China spy balloon has now been shot down over the Atlantic. And this is, if you are just joining us, this is actually a camera that is over the Myrtle Beach area, and it is provided to us by Fox News. They have been out here, as we have, covering this around the clock. And there it goes. It does appear that it was shot down, and now it's just traveling downward toward the Atlantic. We know there was some coordination effort going on because the goal is to actually see the U.S. able to collect whatever was in that balloon as it does come crashing down into the Atlantic. So to coordinate that, that could be why it took so long to get this all underway. They also had to wait, of course, for it to be over the Atlantic because the problem was concerns that it could cause a debris field, a very large one, that could impact people's property. It could cause damage, and it could also cause injuries or even deaths in some cases. You are watching this live, raw, and unfiltered right here on Live Now from Fox. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your day with us here. It is 2:42 on the East Coast and 11:42 on the West Coast. You are watching live, raw, and unfiltered as it appears that China spy balloon has been shot down over the Atlantic Ocean by the U.S. This has been a coordinated effort where the U.S. wants to go below it and capture whatever was inside so they can take a look at it rather than letting it sink into the ocean there. This was initially spotted over in Montana, you'll probably remember, a few days ago. Our very own Andrew Kraft actually spoke with the man who took that initial video and the photos that ended up all over social media. We saw this pretty much dominate the headlines, and it's what everyone is talking about on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whichever social media platform you are using. That is what so many people are talking about. But that right there does appear to be the balloon shot down over the Atlantic Ocean. We also know that President Biden had initially thought that he could shoot down the balloon over land when he was first told about it back on Tuesday, but we later learned from Pentagon officials they had advised against it, warning the potential risk to people on the ground did outweigh the assessment of potential Chinese intelligence gains. So, due to the concern over possible, I would say injuries, deaths, property damage, they chose to wait until it did get over the Atlantic. And it appears right here that is what happened, and they have shot it down and will now go to collect the remnants to try to see what was inside. Earlier on today, as it was over Charlotte, North Carolina, we did see several planes that appeared, several aircraft that were circling around that balloon. It wasn't clear exactly what was going to happen, but we later learned that those aircraft were basically just surveying it and keeping an eye on it as it headed closer and closer. We know early on this morning it made its way over to Asheville, North Carolina. Then it kept going to Charlotte, North Carolina, and a short time ago flew over Myrtle Beach. I say a short time ago, but at this point, it probably has been about 2 hours since it did first make its arrival there in Myrtle Beach. And now we're watching as it appears to have been shot down right before our eyes, live, raw, and unfiltered. And as we talk here, I am working to get you the latest information as we know that FAA ground stop is, of course, still in effect until about 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. 2:45 is when that stop was initially expected to end. However, we have now learned that it's been extended to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. They obviously, the FAA, wanted no planes to be flying in this area as this was ongoing here. But again, the U.S. has downed that Chinese balloon off the Carolina coast and an operation now underway to recover that debris. It does appear that it was a U.S. missile that was used to bring it down. We are waiting to learn more. It's not clear, though, if the Pentagon may hold some kind of news briefing today to provide more information or if they might send out a statement. But we are going to keep in touch here with them. We'll keep an eye on all of that and bring you that information as we do get it. We're actually going to send it over right now to our other team. They are over in Phoenix. We have our two offices, one in Orlando and one in Phoenix. Our very own Andrew Kraft is standing by with an expert to help break all of this down. So I do actually want to send it over to him momentarily. For now, though, I am going to leave this up on your screen after that China spy balloon has been shot down over the Atlantic. You're watching live now from Fox.
All right, and this is Andrew Kraft here. We are taking over for Josh Breslow there in Orlando with Phoenix here. What a few past several minutes as we have just watched the Chinese spy balloon over the coast there, over the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of the Carolinas, just be shot down. I want to play for you the moment. We kind of queued it up. Take a look at this. This isn't live. This was from mere minutes ago. And you can see kind of a poof of smoke, and then the balloon drops significantly in the air, some thousands of feet. Wait for it here. So you can kind of see it dissipate there. We're going to break down what exactly we just saw. This was mere minutes ago, and you can see the balloon kind of drop significantly, dissipate. You see that aircraft flying low underneath it. Let's bring into the conversation national security expert Hal Kempfer, CEO of Global Risk Intelligence and Planning. Hal, thanks so much for being with us. You have been following us and walking us through this story ever since it broke. And just last night, you said this was a distinct possibility, and it has come to fruition. It has happened. I want to put up this tweet from Fox News White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich confirmed what we all saw. U.S. missile shoots Chinese spy balloon, military traffic blocked, balloon coming straight down now. At last updated, had descended more than 20,000 feet. Your first thoughts, Hal?
Well, Andrew, as we talked about it, the balloon went, as we say, feet wet. In other words, it crossed over The coastline, it was just out in the water. Everything I can tell, I'm presuming it was shot within the 13 nautical miles of our territorial waters. So from an international law perspective, that is U.S. territory, U.S. airspace. There really isn't any question on that. The other thing, too, that they were looking at, and this goes back to the history of shooting down balloons, which is not new. It actually goes back a very long way to World War I and before, is a lot of times if you take guns on balloons, you know, whether it's a 50 caliber machine gun on a plane or a 20 millimeter or something like that, you'll end up perforating the balloon. And sometimes those little holes just don't leak as fast as you'd like. So it can actually go a long way. What you saw there, that poof of smoke, what I'm assuming is that they had fired a missile with a proximity fuse that then, when it exploded, sent out shrapnel that literally shredded the balloon. If you saw how fast that balloon collapsed, that indicates to me that the balloon was shredded, essentially, that there was a lot of stuff that took it out. I was kind of wondering if they were going to do that. That would make a lot of sense to me. We certainly have the ability to do that. And using proximity fuses to take out things in the air goes back a very long way. That's kind of one of the basic concepts behind anti-aircraft missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, is you put out a lot of artillery in an area and it hits something. So if you look at that, you see that it just literally shredded, if you will, tore up that thing, which from a recovery standpoint makes it a lot easier. Now it's going down in a fairly straight trajectory. It's not, you know, floating out further out to sea with the winds. It's coming straight down. That allows them to figure out where they want to put their recovery assets, things at the sea, helicopters, stuff like that. Now, what we probably won't see, but what's probably going on right now, is that they've launched a bunch of helicopters. They have swimmers or divers that are literally circling around, waiting for this thing to hit. And in some ways, it would remind you of almost like the Apollo recovery thing, in terms of they're going out there, dropping in the water. But when it goes in the water, what they're going to want to do right up front is try and hook the balloon to try and keep the balloon with the ISR, with the with the electronic package, the surveillance package, all of that equipment that they had hanging beneath it. They want to capture that because we want to go back and forensically take it apart, see what they had, and then from that we can see what they probably collected upon, and do a lot of damage assessment on this, but also a lot of intelligence collection on what the Chinese have.
Okay, Hal, my question, though, you see a lot of the debris. There's going to be a lot of debris kind of falling from this as well, because this is massive. You and I were talking last night. It's the size of 3 school buses. But you also, Hal, saw what was kind of flying underneath the balloon, underneath the debris field. Do you have any indication? I haven't seen any reporting just yet. What took this down? What type of, aircraft? What type of missile everyone's talking about? How this was shot down? Do we have any indications? What does your gut tell you, you think?
Well, not so much my gut, but the reporting was there was 2 F-22s that were on strip alert or standby. There was a report that was out that there were some AC-130 or KC-130 aerial refuelers, and that a couple of F-22s, a flight of F-22s, if you will, were standing by to use this. And I'm not sure what missile was used. All I can tell you from the missile is it was one that went up and probably did a proximity fuse detonation of it. So when it got up to the balloon itself, the warhead went off and then sent shrapnel going through the warhead or through the balloon, which then caused that shredding effect. And as you saw the balloon fell, not surprisingly, little pieces of the balloon started falling off. That's indicative of a balloon that's been really torn apart extensively. If it was just a few perforations in there, the balloon would deflate, but it would stay largely intact. In this case, you see where it literally just, falls apart quickly. And you have to look at the rapidity with which it deflated, which basically it just imploded, if you will. That's also an indication of an explosive device. You see that puff of smoke? That's an indication of an explosive device. That may be, by the way, I'm not a chemist, but I think that some of that puff of smoke may actually be the helium that was in the balloon at high altitude. That's kind of what we're seeing there. But you look how that thing is just literally just fell apart. I mean, all of it immediately deflated in a massive, rapid loss of gas, and then you see where the balloon has essentially become sort of a streaming parachute at this point, and with the with the velocity with which it's falling to Earth, that's starting to rip off little pieces of the balloon, and you're starting to see stuff float away. That's to be expected. Now the question is, and I'm sure they're looking at this very closely with every optical device that we have, did the package, the surveillance package, the electronics underneath, did it stay connected to the balloon, or did it disconnect? And there's a lot of thought on that, which is, well, would they have possibly set this up in such a way that if it was taken down, which they assumed, if you're going to send a balloon like this across the U.S., your assumption might be that it would be taken down, could have been set up that if the balloon does get shot down, that the package might automatically detach and fall to Earth. That's something that they're probably looking at very closely. That would give them a lot of, from a potential Chinese recovery standpoint, it would give them more time to do stuff.
Okay.
But also, it would also destroy it more completely than if it was connected to the balloon itself. So there's just a lot of what ifs when you look at this.
Yeah, Hal, you've kind of been honing in on the fact and this point about what will be retrieved, anything of value, any intelligence, anything that might divine what the Chinese were looking at over the continental United States, why this balloon was up there in the first place. We are approaching the top of the hour. I just want to reset for our viewers. I'm Andrew Kraft. I'm being joined right now by Hal Kempfer, who's been walking us through this story really for the latter part of this week when we found out that that balloon was spotted by a Billings, Montana resident over Montana. It's now been shot down by the U.S. military on the orders of President Biden over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the Carolinas. We just got this new live look there at the ground level, not in the air. They're on the beach. And so how we kind of await any debris to wash up, a collection team like you've been alluding to, if we see any pictures of that. If we also hear from anyone who watched this all unfold in person and who maybe sees some of this debris. But Hal, let's walk our viewers all back from early this morning. We got the news that the FAA was issuing complete ground stops at three pretty major airports there in the Carolinas, the Charleston Airport, Myrtle Beach Airport, and others. We'll see when those are lifted. But that was a pretty good sign that what you told me last night, that this could be shot down over the Atlantic once it gets out that far, that was going to happen. It indeed has happened.
It's interesting if you look out there, because of that narrow window, that 13 nautical miles, we actually might be able to see from the beach actually some of the air activity that's going on in really close proximity to where it went down. You see everybody out there is looking out to the ocean. That's because they might be able to pick up on helicopters and all sorts of stuff. Now, with that said, there was a report that KC-130s, another thing that they might do is, for example, you could have a team on board, all right? And I was in a unit where, that was what we would do. You have a team on board, and you can go out there. You can do it with a helicopter. In fact, it's a lot safer to do it with the helicopters. But you go out there and you can send what we call casting off the helicopter into the water. Swimmers go in, and in this case, the swimmers will go in with gear to try and hook, if you will, somehow connect the balloon, and certainly if the ISR devices or anything they can connect to flotation devices to keep it on the surface to enable a more deliberate collection effort of that material. But that has to happen very fast, because once that thing hits the ocean, it will sink.
Okay, and Hal, to your point, though, how dangerous is that for those who are going to have to be tasked with collecting this from the ocean to retrieve this? You and I were talking offline. That's somewhat dangerous and hairy, is it not?
Yes, that's all I can say.
Okay,
it is, And you can bet that in the briefings they've been talking about this. They've been going through all sorts of immediate action procedures or steps that they would take if they were to get, for example, if they were hooking on and they somehow inadvertently got themselves hooked, how they would try and disconnect themselves, because they don't want to be drugged to the bottom either, obviously. And it could be that they have that out there. That could be done with a helicopter. They could drop the swimmers. They could drop a boat, which would make it a lot easier to operate for any extended period of time into the water, and they could, hook onto it and try to keep as much on the surface as possible using flotation devices. Another thing that's kind of interesting is, along with the Department of Defense military side, there is a thing that's been, in the movies, the rescue swimmers that they have with the Coast Guard, and they too are stationed on the East Coast. They're very capable. They're extremely good. They're kind of used to doing things similar to this, and they might be employed in this simply because they bring a capability and a skill set which is really well suited for this particular mission. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Department of Homeland Security assisting the Department of Defense in recovering the debris.
Okay, Hal, I just want to reset. We are at the top of the hour, 1 o'clock Mountain Time, 3 o'clock Eastern. I'm Andrew Kraft. We're going to walk you through what we all just watched in the last hour. Take a look at some of this video here of the moment the Chinese spy balloon was shot down over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of the Carolinas. This is not a live picture. This was from about 20 minutes ago, and you're going to see this spy balloon puncture momentarily. And there it is, and we have been talking about this ever now since it has happened. President Biden giving the order, presumably, and the balloon now descends thousands of feet. Remember, it was kind of flying at around 60,000 feet, well above commercial air traffic. Well, that did not, preclude airports and the FAA in the area to not take precaution. And we want to walk you all through this story. I want to put up this tweet from Fox News White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich. Confirmed U.S. missile shoots Chinese spy balloon, military traffic blocked. Balloon coming straight down now. At last updated, had descended more than 20,000 feet. Now, we know President Biden, I believe, was spending the Saturday at Camp David in Maryland, to which he was asked about this. Reporters were asking him about this when he was stepping into the black SUV there on the tarmac. Let's just listen to what he had to say. Very, very brief. Okay, so we'll take care of it. That's what President Biden said. That is the only thing we have heard President Biden say about the whole ordeal. Obviously, his various spokespeople have made, copious statements about this on the record there at the State Department, from the White House podium, and at the Pentagon. But that was the first time President Biden, has uttered verbally vocalizing something about the balloon. He said, "We'll take care of it." It has now been taken care of, but it's not over. We want to go through some more of these tweets as well. Let's just show you what the FAA was doing today as well. We're going to move from this Jackie Heinrich tweet. We also have this from the FAA. The FAA has paused departures from and arrivals to Wilmington, Myrtle Beach International, and Charleston International airports to support the Department of Defense in a national security effort. So we'll be on top of that to see when those ground stops have been lifted, now that the balloon will soon be completely out of the air. We're not entirely sure if it has dropped back down. You can also see Jackie Heinrich posting this image of the National Airspace System status. So that is kind of where we are with this story. And then, of course, let's go ground level on the beach. A lot of people have kind of come out. Maybe not a lot of people. Several people have come out to see if they can catch a glimpse of the balloon carcass, the balloon debris, if you will, as it possibly makes its way onshore. And here, a little bit after the top of the hour, we want to bring in, yet again, national security expert, CEO of Global Risk and Intelligence Planning, Hal Kempfer, with the latest. Hal, you have been walking us through this story from the very beginning. What happens now?
Well, right now it's the full recovery effort that they're putting together. You can bet that they've already. Look, if I was to walk this back, I would say the decision to shoot this down over the water was probably made in or around the Montana phase. All right, when it was back that far. They didn't want to say anything, but what they did do within the Department of Defense is, even if the president says, "I want you to look at this," they're making plans. And in many cases, the four-star general will turn around and say, "Let's go ahead and work up a package for various different types of scenarios based on what happens." So they're working that up. They're making those detailed plans, and that gets all the way down to tactical units that will get in a helicopter or on a boat or maybe parachute out of a plane into the water. And they're making detailed plans on how they do this. They're probably yesterday they were doing a bunch of rehearsals, getting ready for this mission when they do it. So they're all standing by. I will say one thing though: we're going to shoot this over the water, and we wanted a lot of special teams that were very capable of doing this recovery, you couldn't have picked a better place than where they are. It's right near Norfolk, Virginia, which has Little Creek, where we have there's Navy SEALs that are based out of there with all of the capabilities they have that they use for just routine training, let alone their operational missions. They're based out of there. You also have Marine Force Reconnaissance and also the Marine Raiders, which have equal capability to do this type of mission. And then, of course, it's a very busy sea lane. So you have Coast Guard, and with the Coast Guard, you have rescue swimmers that can go out and do this as well. So there's a lot of specialized military teams, military assets, if you will, capabilities that are ideally suited for going into a mission to go in quickly and try and maybe hook this. Now, I don't know about the dynamics. Based on this, it looks like they fired a missile. The F-22 has a lot of capabilities. It can fire 20 millimeter Gatling guns. It can also fire AIM missiles, which is very likely. It can fire Sidewinders. It can fire AMRAAM missiles. It has a lot of different. AMRAAMs would not be used, but it has a lot of different capabilities to do this. It's somewhere in there. They fired a missile purely with the proximity detonation that shredded the balloon quickly, so it came down in a straight arc, so it wouldn't keep drifting out over the ocean, which very much enables the recovery effort. Now, the only thing is because it did shred the balloon, it's not going to sit on the surface for any amount of time. So when this thing goes down, they're going to be flying over. They're going to be marking exactly where it is. They're probably hoping it doesn't go into too deep of water, and it probably won't go into too deep of water because it's still over the continental shelf. And of course, off the East Coast, it's a rather gently sloping coastline that goes out a very long way, as opposed to the West Coast where it tends to just drop off. So the ability to go in there with Navy divers and do recover this stuff is also something that's probably there. And I would not be surprised, certainly with Norfolk Naval Base, that Navy divers have been activated, sitting out there on ship. And if they're unable to hook this thing to keep it on the surface for any amount of time, that they will simply mark where it went down. And we're going to bring in a lot of different sensor systems that are used for underwater recovery, and possibly either use Navy divers to go down and get this. There's also remote devices, remotely operated vehicles could go down and hook this stuff and bring it up.
Yeah.
And we're going to recover this, and then begins the intelligence forensic piece, where we tear it apart, see what they could have collected on, see what they have, learn things, if you will.
Yeah, and here at Live Now, we're awaiting any White House statement about this. We're awaiting as well, Hal, of course, Chinese reaction. They did say, at least their foreign minister said yesterday, they regret this. They said this is a, quote, civilian airship. Of course, that's the Chinese line at the moment. Hal, I'm curious, though. So many people have caught this. They looked up into the sky. They took a picture of it. They took video of it. Now there's going to be probably a pretty big throng of people on the beach waiting to see if they can, make sense of it or get a glimpse. Would the U.S. government want to talk to those people who have video of this? Would they want to look at it? Would they want to see or divine any information from people who have captured this, just everyday people like you and me? Is that something they would collect too for, information?
They might. It depends. It depends on how. If we think that we have enough that we don't need to get that,
Okay.
then that's not a big deal. You know, it's a decision too. I'm going to tell you that when you go out there and the FBI knocks on your door and says, "We'd like to see the video on your phone,"
Yeah.
that can be a little intimidating.
Right.
All right. What they might do is do it in a rather, I would say, a soft approach, which would
Okay.
be, "Hey, if you'd like to share that with us, we would appreciate whatever you have. We'd be grateful for it. We're trying to find out as much about this balloon as possible. We're also tracking some details of when it was over different places, and we'd like to see any images of this balloon that people might have." And if you did it in that type of way, even if you were to go online, which go online and they're going to see who's posting stuff, and they might try to contact them. That's possible. On the other hand, they do look at the possible ramifications of this, which is some people might really be irritated if the FBI was asking to get a hold of their video. They might have a different interpretation of what that means. So I'm not saying they're not going to do it, because I would think they're going to do something to try and do this. I would also say that from an open source intelligence collection standpoint, that there's a lot of things they don't really need to go out and ask them for, because they can literally see what people posted. So if they have a video of the balloon in our day and age, people will post that on Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media platforms. And so there is a wealth of imagery, if you will, that they can pull from that's already been posted online. And so that they'll probably exploit that first before they do anything more direct, like trying to contact those who actually filmed it to begin with. And I think that's just, there's a little bit of common sense there, but also and I would mention too, flying over eastern Montana, and I have a lot of family from that area, that if the FBI just came up and started knocking on their doors, that would probably cause a little bit of concern as to what's going on. So they're probably sensitive to that.
Hal, I'm curious, what is your view? What is your opinion? Does this rise to the level or the occasion that necessitates President Biden coming out in front of the American people, explaining the decision-making process behind this, explaining what the response is going to be now? Is this that big of a moment, is what I'm kind of getting at here? Do you think we need to hear from the president?
I think he has to at this point. You can't have something this big and he just doesn't say anything about it. He hasn't said much. I mean, really, if you talk about the president and what he said, it was one very short phrase, which is, we're taking care of it, so to speak. And that's all we've had. Now that it's down, they're going to do the recovery effort. I would imagine, just because this is so high profile, we may find out some details that wouldn't be shared normally. I've been involved with stuff overseas, privy to some recovery efforts when things go down in the water. And I can tell you that we don't normally share those with the public, or share a lot of that with the public, because especially with intelligence systems, even if it's enemy or not enemy, but foreign intelligence systems, we just don't want to share what's going on with whatever they're doing. So, it's not always super secretive, but we do kind of try to keep it quiet as far as the details, because we don't want to reveal a lot of our methods and certainly our sources for how we know what we know and how we did what we did. We don't want that being disseminated, so we keep that very close hold. And so we're very circumspect with what we release publicly, lest somebody try to start connecting the dots to figure out how we know things and how we do things, so they can plan against us in the future. So, and there'll be some of that here. There's going to be a certain amount of operational security that goes on with this to make sure that we don't reveal too much to the public about how we do these things. Although some of the things that I've mentioned, we're not really saying too much, since in many cases we put those capabilities on recruiting commercials for some of the armed forces to get people excited about joining, the various different services. So it's not a super secret thing that we have the ability to. There's nothing secret about the ability to jump out of airplanes with parachutes, or jump in the water out of helicopters at low altitude, or put boats in the water, stuff like that, because we put that out of there all the time as part of our regular public information campaign. But But how they specifically do this one,
Uh-huh.
there will be some details I'm sure they do not want to share
I see.
with the public, especially if the underwater recovery portion, when they go in there and try to find the sensor system, stuff like that. Department of Defense has some amazing capabilities, and not ones that they necessarily want everybody to know the details
Right.
of.
Yeah. Hal, we are getting now some more reaction. I just want to put up, though, this tweet first by Pentagon correspondent at Fox, Jennifer Griffin. She says U.S. fighter jets shot down the Chinese spy balloon over the Atlantic Ocean. So we still don't know what type yet. You're kind of indicating you think F-22 possibly. We were seeing some reporting F-16s were in the area as well. And then, of course, Hal, now we're getting reaction from congressional leaders and lawmakers on Capitol Hill. I want to just put this up. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeting this out. I strongly condemn President Xi's brazen incursion into American airspace, and I commend President Biden's leadership in taking down the Chinese balloon over water to ensure safety for all Americans. Now we can collect the equipment and analyze the technology used by the CCP. We also are getting more comments in as well. This from Republican Congressman of Texas, August Pfluger. He says the Chinese spy balloon was not a surprise to the Biden administration. They should have dealt with this the instant it crossed into our sovereign territory before it traveled across the entire United States. Unfortunately, the message sent abroad is that Biden will not protect America. Strong words there from that congressman. You have cautioned and you have told me time and time again over the last couple of days that that was not the right move to shoot this down over the continental United States. Obviously, some Republican congressmen disagree with that assessment. What do you make of that? Why was this the right move to shoot it down over water?
From a public safety perspective,
okay,
this basically eliminates risk to people on the ground. And I'm not saying it's not the right move per se.
Okay.
It's a risk assessment they have to make. If you shoot it down over a populated area, something of that size with all the equipment on board, and then the balloon itself, you risk the chance.
Sorry, I got to interrupt, Hal. It looks like President Biden is stepping off the plane there on the tarmac. Let's listen.
When I was briefed on the balloon, I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. They decided, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, they decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water outside within the 12-mile limit. They successfully took it down, and I want to compliment our aviators who did it, and we'll have more to report on this a little later. Thank you.
Because what did you say about China? What's your message to China?
You were saying the recommendation was from your national
I
security.
told them to shoot it down.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
But the recommendation.
They said to me, let's wait till the safest place to do it.
What does this mean for China, relation to China?
Okay, Hal, that was quite interesting there. President Biden, very candid about the decision-making process. That's what I was curious about. I wanted to know when this decision was made. He said it was made Wednesday when he first learned about it. So we went to black there. But they said, his advisors cautioned that they should, like you just literally said, wait until the risk assessment is so low.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they were tracking it. You know, these balloons and other ISR assets, they come over, occasionally stray over U.S. airspace and stuff. And it's not always something where the White House has to make a determined decision to do something. There is a lot of discussion going on right now, which I think is legitimate, which is when it was flying that arc up around the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, and even when it went into Canadian airspace, why didn't we take it out there? That's a very good question. I think that's something that U.S. Northern Command needs to take a hard look at the decision making on that, and as to whether there was a undue pause, because from what I can tell, and I may be wrong, but from what I can tell, it looked like it did stray into U.S. airspace when it made that arc. Now, if it never strayed into U.S. airspace, then I stand corrected. However, once it goes into Canadian airspace, that's still under NORAD. That's that big air defense command that we have under U.S. Northern Command, and the Canadian government and the U.S. government work side by side on that. We control that airspace as if it's one airspace. So it could have been brought down flying over, say, British Columbia or something like that, or the Yukon territories, depending on its exact arc. So it could have been taken down over there, and certainly that would have been a very, very low chance that it would have caused injury or damage on the ground because it's so sparsely populated in those areas. But it did. Once it got over populated areas in the continental United States, it's a completely different risk assessment. Even when it gets down south over populated areas of southern Canada, it's a very different risk assessment. And if they had shot it down, and it's not, it's not causing any harm to the U.S., it's collecting intelligence. But if they had shot it down hypothetically, and let's say the balloon and all that stuff falls on a freeway and was to hit a bunch of cars or a bus or something like that, and people were injured or killed, I think that would be the discussion we'd be having right now. So these are all things that they have to weigh when they do this. And there is a certain Murphy's Law aspect of this, is if you shoot it down and you don't want to land on anything where it's going to cause serious damage or hurt someone, Murphy's Law will kick in, and the worst possibility may be what actually does happen. So they had to weigh that in with this. The other thing they're also looking at is they had to make a weaponeering decision on what to take this down with. There have been many times in the past where they go up there and they react to a balloon and they fire on it, usually with guns, and it perforates the balloon and the balloon keeps going. And there's been numerous times in the past where the balloon keeps going and it does cause some serious problems as to where it lands. And in some cases, what they did may have made it worse than if they had done nothing at all. So I'm sure somebody went in there and gave a brief, said, by the way, Mr. President, the last 10 times we tried to do this, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And so he was weighing that in his mind as he's going through it. This made sense. And keep in mind, even though it flew over these, you're talking strategic bases like Maelstrom and others where we have, flew over bases where we have, say, about 400 ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles are at. That's where we have strategic bomber bases. These they're potentially collecting some very valuable intelligence that the Chinese could use for whatever they plan to use it for. Even though it's doing this, we also lock things down. We know that balloon's up there, so on those bases, we go into a operational condition which shuts everything down to minimize the potential enemy or threat collection that could be going on with that. And keep in mind too, we have satellites flying, Chinese, Russian satellites flying over all the time. Other countries fly satellites over. So there's a certain amount of operational security that takes place with those to minimize our signature, to eliminate the ability of foreign countries to collect upon us on a regular basis. The thing with this, Will, is it's so low that it gets, certainly from an optical standpoint, but also from an electromagnetic spectrum, it can collect things that you can't easily collect as well from space. And so also it doesn't have to get directly over a base in order to collect. There's what's called it's basically a slant in terms of how far it looks out and how accurately it looks out in terms of what it gets. And if it gets within proximity of some of these bases, even if it's, several miles away or dozens of miles away or further, being at 60,000 feet, it can see what's going on in that base very clearly. It can collect a lot of intelligence on that. And in this case, we're also watching not only how they control the balloon in terms of turning it left, right, or whatever, but also how they're uploading that data and how that, and the uplink and downlink that they have with that. And of course, the working hypothesis is that this balloon has been continuously controlled by the Chinese the whole time, and that is most easily done or most likely done via satellites. So even though this is a lighter than air balloon collecting intelligence in U.S. airspace, it's not like satellites aren't being used in this overall collection effort.
Okay.
Because that's probably how they're controlling them and getting the information.
Hal, though, Biden was shouted a question he didn't answer about what he might think any escalatory posture on the part of the Chinese would be. Do you anticipate something to the effect of some counter-action, countermeasure escalation on the part of the Chinese over this? Or are they going to move on from this? What happens now on the Chinese side from that perspective? Are you worried?
I have to tell you, if I was to lean one way or the other, I would probably say I think the Chinese won't really react to it at all.
Oh, okay.
I think what they're going to do is they may have some words about it. They may say they're going to probably double down on it was a weather balloon. You didn't need to do this. Blah blah blah. You know, that's our story, and we're sticking to it. Sort of methodology there. But with that, this has turned into a very embarrassing episode for the Chinese. They have been called out very publicly on this. They've watched this balloon get shot down just now, and I'm sure that was a fairly dramatic scene. It was fairly dramatic for us to watch live, and I'm sure it was dramatic for the Chinese to watch live on television in Beijing as well. So they're looking at that. There's also recognition, and I think they should have known this going in, that whatever technology they on that surveillance balloon would probably get captured by the U.S. and we'd be able to tear it apart. That's part of my concern, that they may have something that they had rigged up, and that may be something that we were thinking of too, that they may have rigged up something that if the balloon goes down, they're able to destroy that surveillance equipment. And of course, the way you would destroy it would probably be with explosives. And that could have been part of the risk assessment process is, do you think they may have explosives on this? That would be part of the thinking. And with that said, you know, we have some pretty high-powered optical sensors that we can turn to that balloon, and we can look at that sensor array and basically analyzing it, for lack of a better term, we can kind of figure out what they have, and we can also figure out if we were to attach something that could destroy those sensors in quick order if the balloon went down, what would we do or what would they do to do that, and then pay particular attention on that array as to where those things might be placed. And if we saw something anomalous that could be potentially an explosive charge or something, that could have weighed into our thinking process. Now, we haven't seen, as we're looking at this, and we don't have a whole lot of video on where the actual sensor system fell. It did look like it fell faster than the regular balloon, which indicates it may have detached. That's very possible. And if it did detach, then it went down, and it could have exploded somewhere down there that we just haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I'm curious to get your thoughts on when this might exactly hit the water. We don't really have a live now look in the air anymore. This is from just last hour. So it very well could possibly have already hit the water. We just don't know. Obviously, we have this. This is in, I believe, on the beach in South Carolina. This is a live look. So you see some people just enjoying their Saturday, a beautiful day, gorgeous day, blue skies. And then maybe this will wash up. You don't think it's going to wash up, though, on the shore. They're going to collect this before it gets to that point, right?
Yeah, I don't see any of this. I mean, you might see parts of the balloon that's shredded come up on the shore, and that would be simply because we don't want to collect it. We don't need it. But I would imagine certainly any of the equipment that came down, I would find that very unlikely that it would get washed up on shore, because first off, most of it's fairly heavy. I don't think any of it would be particularly buoyant that it would come in. The balloon itself, if it's still connected to heavy equipment, it'll probably sink to the bottom and probably be in the same debris field that you'll find the equipment in. But what you can rest assured is that it's going to be that area where that debris field where it goes in is going to be thoroughly searched. Everything that we can recover is going to be recovered from it. That they will be using all the technology that we can bring to bear to find anything that we possibly can. And also that we have a pretty good idea of what we're looking for already. That we've been looking at this balloon very closely. We may have had intelligence on this particular configuration of surveillance balloons before that thing ever even flew into U.S. airspace. But we've been looking at it very carefully. And not only are we looking for things, but we have a very good idea of what to look for, and an idea of what that might look like if it was along the ocean bottom.
Okay.
Now, the other thing is we want to get in there very quickly too, because the longer that sits on the bottom, the tougher it is to find. So we want to get in there very quickly and find this stuff while it's still sitting on the bottom, because look, it's the ocean, and the longer it's out there, the more things get covered up.
Okay. Hal, we're approaching the bottom of the hour now, about 3:30 there. That is in Surfside Beach, South Carolina. So a few people out and about just walking their dogs, enjoying a nice, probably brisk February day there on the East Coast. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue speaking with Hal Kempfer. We appreciate his valuable insight into this big story today. And then give you updates. We're getting more updates from the FAA. We're also getting some new comments in from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. We'll see you in 2 minutes.